1. Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined by Jamie Eisenberg, Dave Richard. We have our first post-draft rookie-only mock. How excited are you guys?
Pumped.
Very excited.
Except I'm picking 12th. That kind of stinks.
Well, that's
Well,
why
you were last to reply to the email, so or you actually didn't. You never replied to the email.
I don't think I ever replied to the email.
That's why I put you 12th.
You were in whether you wanted to be in. And I thought it was interesting because I think last year, Jamie, when you put this mock together, you tried to mostly give us our draft spots based on the YOLO league that we were in. This year, I actually got the number 3 pick, which is what I have in our YOLO league. But nice. I noticed that most other people did not, although I think you two are towards the end, right? I
didn't even look at that because it's the different cast of characters. I think I'm somewhere. It's a 14-team league, so a little different. So I think I'm 10 through 14. And Dave's got to be last because he won it.
I won the league last year. Take that, random YouTube commenter that thought I sucked at Dynasty. So I've got 14th, but I also have somebody else's first-round pick, and that's at 6. And so I'm really curious who goes off the board at 6 in this draft. But I got 2 picks in our Dynasty league. My window is still open to compete in the YOLO.
So before we get into the opening picks, we should tell you this is a 1-quarterback league. This is a PPR draft, and we will be doing 3 rounds, no snake. So we will do a super flex mock next week. I know a lot of you play in those types of leagues. We may even get a tight end premium mock in at some point in the next month or so. But this will be a 1-quarterback PPR league. There is absolutely positively no debate about who should go number 1 in this format. I think in super flex you get a little bit of debate maybe between Richardson and Bijan, and I know some people even have Richardson ahead, but in a 1-quarterback league it's Bijan. I think the interesting thing, and he did go first in this mock, the interesting thing is how much would you pay to get to Bijan, especially if you have a team that's pretty good. Like, is it worth 2 firsts? Is it worth 3 firsts? How much would you pay, Jamie?
I could tell you because I'm in a Superflex rookie-only mock draft where Bijan did go 1, and then immediately after Bijan went, there was a trade. I'm going to get the trade parameters of what it was. But so Bijan went 1, Richardson went 2, then there was a trade to get Bijan from the manager. So I will find it for you. But in that Superflex draft, it went Bijan, Richardson, Gibbs, and then the other 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah, I have, Dave, in our YOLO league, a team with Patrick Mahomes, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Devontae Smith, Chigo Okonkwo, David Njoku. My second running back's Khalil Herbert. My third running back is you. And so I have the 3rd pick in our YOLO league. Dan Schneier has the 1st pick. I've already made 1 offer, and he's negotiating real hardball. He will not even make a counter, says he's not trading Bijan. I offered a 2024 first, my 3rd pick in the 2023 draft, and Elijah Moore. That was not enough to get Dan to make a counter.
That doesn't make me feel good about my chances of making a move to 1 with Dan because I also sent him an offer. And
it was not as good as mine, is what you're telling me.
Well, I don't know. Certainly mine had more quantity to it than yours did.
Right.
But mine, I don't have the 3rd overall pick, so I can't offer
right.
that to him.
Jamie, I will tell you, when Dave says mine has more quantity than yours did, I received a high quantity, not quality offer from Dave. I think it had multiple 4th and 5th round picks in the offer. Which
sounds like a Dave trade.
Super exciting in a rookie draft to pile up those 4th and 5th round picks, especially in a 14-team league when you're looking at like pick 60 and beyond.
To be fair, there are free agents also available. And once upon a time in one of these rookie-only drafts, I got Mark Andrews in round 4. So, and he was not a rookie. He was a free agent. That's how good we are in our dynasty plays, that Mark Andrews was a free agent at some point. And he didn't even go until round 4. So there are still some veterans that could be had with those picks, especially it's an IDP league, linebackers, defensive backs. You can find those types of players. So I kind of like those 4th and 5th round picks.
So we've already go ahead. Yes.
I was going to give you the trade. Here's the trade. So this is a dynasty league. It's actually in Mike Taglier's honor. He's the one who started the league, so we've continued it without him. Obviously miss him, and league's not the same. But so Bijan went 1, and then the Bijan manager immediately flipped him to the person with the 2nd pick, and to get to Bijan gave up 102, 202 in round 1 in 2024. So gave up 102, 202, 2024 first to get Bijan and a 2024 second.
Ooh, they got the 2024 second as well.
No, second round.
Right, but still,
Yeah.
like to get another pick, I thought, and I think in Superflex, the gap, like we talked about, the gap between 1 and 2 is not as big as Superflex because of Anthony Richardson. But that's still a pretty good haul to get two. I mean, the second pick and a 2024 first, just for Bijan.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so we already showed you the draft board. We've got a couple picks in already. Bijan Robinson went number 1. That was no surprise. Jahmyr Gibbs went to Jacob Gibbs at pick number 2. Dave, is it just as obvious that Jahmyr Gibbs should be the number 2 pick in a 1-quarterback league as it is that Bijan should be number 1?
Gibbs gonna Gibbs. Look, I think that because there isn't a surefire wide receiver that we can all wrap our arms around and say this is the guy who should, no doubt about it, be the 102. I almost think you gravitate toward either the upside of Richardson or the upside of Gibbs. And most fantasy managers, they're going to have their quarterback covered in a dynasty league. They might not take Richardson at 102. Totally reasonable. And therefore, Gibbs would be the best available player with the highest upside, save for a couple of wide receivers that also have terrible downside, but so does Gibbs. So I think that Gibbs is the one that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think it will be in a majority. Now, there will be some JSN sneaking in ahead of Gibbs, but I think a majority will be Bijan, then Gibbs. And then it gets interesting at pick 3. And I had pick 3. I took Jordan Addison, which is not the same way I had it ranked before the draft. For me, it was Bijan, it was Gibbs, and then it was JSN with the 4th pick. Part of it is landing spot. But I also had Addison as my number 2 wide receiver right behind JSN, so it didn't take a big difference. But Jamie, I think landing in what will, I think, be a high pass attempt offense with Justin Jefferson on the other side, but room for plenty of targets besides that, versus landing with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore in what they'll throw more this year, but probably is still a low pass attempt volume for Zay Flowers. Do you agree that it's Addison and JSN clearly as 1 and 2? And then how do you rank those two?
I think if you're trying to compete this year and that's your decision, I would go with Jordan Addison. If you're looking at it long term, I would probably go Smith-Njigba, just because I hope, based on what his pedigree was, that he can be the top tier receiver in this class. Now, I don't think that there's a huge separation between him and Addison. I think both guys are going to be pretty special talents. But I mean, we've seen Tyler Lockett outproduce DK Metcalf really the majority of their tenure together. Would it be surprising if Smith-Njigba outproduces DK Metcalf during the majority of their tenure together? The thing you got to take into account with maybe both situations, but I think probably Kirk Cousins maybe has another year or two longer with Minnesota, maybe than Geno Smith does with Seattle, just given the fact of, you know, where they've come from and what they've done. You know, we could easily see Minnesota hit the reset button and say bye-bye Kirk, but I think you know what the scenario is. I don't think, though, that Jordan Addison is ever going to be better than Justin Jefferson. You know, that would just be such a huge leap, clearly, to get there. So to see Smith-Njigba go ahead of Addison would not surprise me.
No, I think it will be the case. Dave, I want to look at that Seattle situation just a little bit for 2023.
Sure.
Jamie mentioned that I think once Lockett's gone, JSN could be better than DK Metcalf. It wouldn't be that surprising. This year, though, he's going to be with both Metcalf and Lockett. What do you think the chances are as a rookie that JSN's better than Lockett?
Slim, because Lockett's just been so consistently good for fantasy. He's just one of those underrated guys that no one goes into their draft saying, I got to get Tyler Lockett. But by October, you're going, I wish I had taken Tyler Lockett. He's pretty much been that guy year after year, and he does a really good job. This is an underrated part of his game. He does not take a ton of hits. If you watch him play, he gets out of bounds when at the last possible moment when a defender's coming. A defender's right there in the middle of the field. He makes a catch. He gets down. So he's done a pretty good job of preserving his body. That being said, he has had some injuries that have kept him off the field. I think the Seahawks ran into a lot of trouble last year. And I don't have the stats to back this up, and I do intend to do the research on it. I think they ran into trouble against too high defenses. And so when teams are trying to just take away the deep ball, play against the perimeter, middle of the field is open, they couldn't consistently win in those situations. with Smith-Njigba, they will be able to win considerably more often in those situations. He did a lot of that at Ohio State. He played in the slot a ton. I think that's where his career begins, is out of the slot. And he just creates a whole bunch of new problems for all the defenses that are going to play against Seattle. The other trick is, will Seattle continue to throw the ball at a 59% rate, which is high for them? They're usually around 55, 52, somewhere in that range. Pete Carroll loves to run the football. You've heard that 100 times before. If they continue to trust in Geno Smith, and my hunch is that they will, just based on what they did in round one by drafting Smith-Njigba, that there will be a modest amount of targets to go around for all three guys. But I do have a hard time believing that Smith-Njigba will score as much as Lockett or be as explosive on a per-catch basis or on any of the per-catch metrics than Lockett was or will be.
Now, you see here, like I think we all agree Addison and JSN pretty close for dynasty purposes, but they did not go back-to-back. Zach Brook actually took Anthony Richardson at pick 4. He was one of my biggest risers, the biggest riser for sure, of players that I had in my top 12 before the draft, because the one risk that I saw with Anthony Richardson was that the NFL saw him as too big of a project to take him this early. Jamie, with the fact that he went number 4, with the fact that he has Jalen Hurts, offensive coordinator from the past 2 years, how high is the ceiling for Anthony Richardson in the first couple of years even?
It's immense. I mean, we're early in Justin Fields' tenure, and look what he did last year, for fantasy. He had that stretch of games, ended up finishing the season, just shy of Lamar Jackson's Lamar Jackson's rushing record for quarterback, and didn't throw for 2,500 yards, so he doesn't have to be a prolific passer to be great for fantasy managers. So I think when you start to look at what he can do and what hopefully he will do, it's a division that doesn't, present a huge amount of challenges. It's when you compare him to the other rookies, I think he's got the best receiver and maybe the best receiving core, when you compare him to Bryce Young in his situation and CJ Stroud in his situation, and so I could see a scenario where he surprises us as a passer. At least that's the hope, but we were having this conversation yesterday, Heath, with Adam, that, if he can get to 3,000 and 1,000, that's going to shatter, the expectations, if he can become that. And Adam brought this up. I thought that Daniel Jones had passed for more, shocking that he brought up Daniel Jones, but that he only threw for 3,200 yards and just over 700 rushing yards, and one of only 9 quarterbacks to ever do that, to go 3,007. So if he can get to close to 3,000 and maybe eclipse 3,000, and, he ran for 600 plus yards at Florida last year. And so 26 total touchdowns, it's worth in redraft leagues to take him as a top 10 quarterback, and in Dynasty, I think he should be the first quarterback. I thought that even going into the draft process, because he just does things that these other guys don't do.
Okay, Dave. So I know you already said that Richardson's inside your top 10 right now. I said I'd do that if he wins the job week 1 over Gardner Minshew, and I think he probably will. But what I struggle with is, can I rank him much higher than 10 in Dynasty? Because looking at my Dynasty rankings, he's not going to be a top 5 quarterback. I'm not ranking him ahead of Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Fields, or Lamar Jackson. The next 3 guys, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, their floors are so much higher than Anthony Richardson's floor. Yeah. Like it's in 2 quarterback, I don't think you can even consider it. But in a 1 quarterback league, like, does Richardson have to be 9 behind those guys, or would you rank him in Dynasty ahead of Herbert, Burrow, or Lawrence?
I can't do that. Just not at this point in time. Why do that?
Right. It doesn't. It seems strange that this rookie quarterback, who is like the 4th or 5th pick in rookie-only drafts, will have the same ranking in redraft as he does in Dynasty.
Sure. And that's, I don't know. I guess that's par for the course. I mean, here's what I would ask of you, Heath. Measure him. Who is currently your 9th quarterback in Dynasty rankings?
Anthony Richardson.
After him.
After him's Kyler.
Tell me why you ranked Richardson ahead of Kyler.
Because I don't feel like Kyler's floor is close to Herbert, Lawrence, or Burrow right now. I think there's some real uncertainty for Kyler Murray based on this offensive system in Arizona, based on the weapons that he might have around him, based on his own health and his recent play.
Makes sense to me. Who do you have behind Kyler Murray?
That is, then we get to the rookies. Bryce Young, then Tua, then CJ Stroud.
Okay. I think when you get to, forget about Young and Stroud, when you get to Tua and you get to Kyler, and we've seen a couple of years from these guys, and they've had their amazing moments, and they've also had injuries that make us nervous. I just think it makes sense to lean toward the unknown and the upside.
Yeah.
And that's what you have with Richardson. We know that the Colts are going to use him for his rushing. This is a game of stats. He should get a ton of rushing yards and plenty of rushing touchdowns. There's a great article, an in-depth article on The Athletic about how far the Colts went to research Anthony Richardson. And they talked to a ton of people. There were about 5 people in their front office, if you include Shane Steichen, who were really invested in studying him. And they all came out of, like 2 weeks before the draft, supremely confident in Richardson being not only available when they picked at 4, but also the guy that they want. And that makes me feel better about Richardson. So I think I'm good to go with where you have him ranked. I think you've got it exactly perfect.
Dave is on the clock, so we're going to give him a break here to go make his pick. We've had a flurry of picks come in. Zach Charbonnet, Zay Flowers, Bryce Young, Quentin Johnston, CJ Stroud, Dalton Kincaid. We're going to talk about those guys and more right after this break. Okay, Jamie, our first big surprise of the mock, at least for me, according to my rankings, Dan Schneider taking Zach Charbonnet at pick number 6, ahead of Zay Flowers, ahead of Quentin Johnston. Not discouraged at all, apparently, by the fact that Charbonnet landed in Seattle with Ken Walker. Where are you comfortable with taking Charbonnet? And do you think that to pick him at 6, do you have to believe that he's going to win the job from Walker?
I don't know if you have to believe he's going to win the job from Walker, but you got to, obviously assume that he's going to have a pretty significant role. And it's a huge leap, not necessarily from where the talent is, because it wouldn't surprise me if Charbonnet is better than Ken Walker in terms of maybe getting more work, not necessarily being completely, dominant over him in terms of where they are from one year to the next for these two, players. But I think taking him over the receivers is probably where the risk comes in. Like when I first looked up at the draft board, because I picked right before Dave, I was like, oh, maybe I'll consider Charbonnet here. And I was like, oh, he already went. So that was a little bit of a shock. But, I really think when you talk about this draft in a 1 QB draft, 1 QB rookie, draft, the talent really gets thin from the top tier guys going into, what the process is, so with Flowers and Johnston, you can see a pretty clear path to them being, if not this year, next year, the best receiver on their team. And, for Johnston, he could be with Justin Herbert for, the next 5-6 years. For Flowers, if Lamar Jackson takes hold of this new offensive system that he's in and, is that guy, even if he's just Marquise Brown, that's not a bad place to be, from where Brown was with Jackson in the early part of their career. So I think Charbonnet, just knowing that the running back lifespan is not very long, the fact that he's going to be behind, or sharing with Walker for at least the next 3 seasons, it's a little bit, tough to take him over those 2 guys.
Okay, so Dave, you took Devon Achane. I'm going to say that wrong about 7 million times.
You just said it right.
I've struggled with him versus Charbonnet. Yeah. You got Achane at pick 12. Charbonnet went pick 6. If they'd both been there when you were picking, would you have taken Charbonnet or would you have gone with Achane?
I think Achane has more upside than Charbonnet, just because you look at the other running backs that he's with in Miami, and you've got to figure that he'll have a shot to wrestle away the lead job as soon as this season. And if he does a good enough job with it, the worst that the Dolphins will do going into next year is pair him with somebody that might handle, certain situations, like maybe third down, something like that Achane might not be great at, but take some work off of him, but he can still be a really good player. He's got unique speed. I think he's perfect for the type of run scheme that they have in Miami. And I just think he's got the most upside. I look at a lot of the other receivers that are left, and they might all play longer than Achane. I don't know how many 1,000-yard, 7-touchdown seasons Jalen Hyatt's going to have, Jonathan Mingo's going to have, Rashee Rice is going to have. But I think what I'm doing here basically is I'm taking the thinnest position, because I know that when I'm back up in round 2, there's going to be almost nothing left at running back that I'm going to like. And there'll be something at wide receiver that I'll be able to sink my teeth into. So if I'm building this, imaginary team for Dynasty, I'd rather start with a running back, getting one while I can.
He just makes me so nervous because he's so small.
He is.
He's.
I was just gonna say he doesn't necessarily play small,
Right.
but he is small. There's no question about it.
So, Jamie, there was 2 wide receivers taken before you, and one of the reasons Dave took a running back is because the top 4 wide receivers are gone, and a lot of people think there's only 4 wide receivers worth a first-round pick in this rookie class. And that might be true. I've got 5. But Zay Flowers and Quentin Johnston went 2 picks apart right in front of you, and you said you had to make this decision in a league. This is another one where I had Flowers ranked ahead of Johnston 1 spot before the draft, and now I've flipped it after the draft because Johnston got tied to Justin Herbert, and Johnston landed in the more high octane pass offense. Where are you at on those 2?
I'm same. I was struggling with it, and for me, it's a super flex league, so I had the choice between those 2 receivers and Will Levis also, and so I may regret passing on Levis just because my quarterback situation isn't the best. But I was looking at who's the best player. And I do think that, if you're talking about for this season, it wouldn't be surprising if they're somewhat close in production, just because while I think Flowers is the best Ravens receiver, you still have Odell there, who I think is going to get force-fed targets. You still have Rashad Bateman there, and obviously Mark Andrews. It's going to be very difficult to see a situation where Quentin Johnston, if everybody's healthy, is getting more targets than Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. But as we saw last year, both guys missed a ton of time, and Mike Williams had a hard time staying healthy. So I think if you're just looking at the short term, I probably give Flowers a slight edge, but I think long term, I think you said it. Johnston being tied to Justin Herbert gives him a significant advantage. I love the fact that Kellen Moore is there. I think it's going to be a very prolific passing game, no surprise because of the quarterback. And so Johnston to me could be a superstar. Wouldn't surprise me if he's a total flop. We've seen some of these big receivers, especially he's a basket catcher kind of guy. That tend to struggle a little bit. But I also think He profiles, how we always used to make fun of Adam that, receivers got to be a certain size in his mind to be a number 1 guy. This guy's got size speed that, a lot of the guys in this class don't have. So, he feels like he could just step into Mike Williams' role as early as 2024, and it could be a special type of player. So I went with Johnston, and just hopefully that pays off. And I don't regret, for me, mostly it was passing on the quarterback, but don't regret making the wrong decision at receiver either.
I'm going to stick with you, Jamie, because your first-round pick is a struggle that I've had, Dalton Kincaid, and whether he should be a first-round pick in rookie drafts. I've just kind of grown sour on taking any tight end in the first round of rookie drafts with the way the last few years have gone. And I don't know how I feel about this Buffalo landing spot. On the one hand, it's a fantastic offense. You could make the same argument for being tied to Allen as you would for being tied to Herbert. On the other hand, they've not used a tight end in the way that everyone's just presuming that Dalton Kincaid's going to be used as this big slot now. And I have a hard time projecting that offensive philosophy being different because of one player. Are you doing this because you think he's going to have immediate success, or because long-term you love the upside so much?
A little bit of both. Not necessarily immediate success, because we know rookie tight ends tend to struggle a little bit, but he comes in a little bit older, a little bit, hopefully more mature, and hopefully that will carry a little bit of weight. But I do think that, they've been struggling to find a third receiving option. Dave was in love with Isaiah McKenzie last year. Understandably so. It was a great opportunity. I was hoping Khalil Shakir was going to be that guy this year, and it may develop, but it feels like it's going to be difficult with Kincaid there now. Stephon Diggs is getting older, and so they're going to have to at some point turn over this receiving core. But this might be the type of guy that could just be a playmaker for one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So, yes, it's not exactly the fit that you would say because of what they've done. Dawson Knox and Kincaid are totally different type of players. And, like Adam's been arguing, for example, Adam A's has been arguing about the touchdowns. And so how Knox has been very touchdown dependent. Does Kincaid catch those touchdowns? I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think he'll be a better pass catcher. I think he'll be more involved. He'll get more targets, get more opportunities. And so, it kind of shows you, once you get past, if you want to even consider Bryce Young and CJ Stroud first-round picks in a 12-team, one-quarterback league, once you get past those 4 receivers, and really the choice for me was Mingo or Kincaid. But I went with difference maker at that position versus where Mingo may or may not get to at the receiver spot. If Kincaid hits and is one of these premier tight ends, you want that on your fantasy team.
Yeah, and Mingo is my number 12 pick. I've actually got him ahead of Kincaid and Achane. Dave, the other reason I wanted to stay with Jamie for that pick is because I wanted you to talk about my pick and tell me how I was pronouncing his last name wrong. But Israel Abanikanda. This was a draft Nick darling before the draft, and there was just all the helium came out because he was drafted to go to the Jets, and Breece Hall's already there. And I see him now in the third round of rookie drafts sometimes. I'm still perfectly fine with him in the second round. He still has the elite athleticism. He still has the huge big time upside. And he has an offensive coordinator who mostly has run a two-back set. Like, this could absolutely be an Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon type situation with Breece Hall and Izzy. I think he can be a high-end flex even with Hall, and Hall's coming off an ACL. There's an opportunity. If he turns into the lead back, I think he's a top 12 guy.
Okay, so everybody that's trying to trade for Breece Hall in Dynasty, take the last 45 seconds of what Heath said, clip that, and send it to the person that you're trying to get Breece Hall from, because that's the downside for Breece Hall, and it's the upside for Abanikanda. I like the talent too. The talent belongs exactly where you took him. He's a good running back. The only thing I'll say is he's bigger than Devon Achane, but he's got smaller hands than him. But other than that, like, really good running back, lots of experience in a pro style offense. He's a good player, and it's almost a little bit of what Seattle did by taking Charbonnet. The Jets just want to get better at running back. They know that they don't have a sure thing with Breece Hall this year. Here comes Abanikanda, who can come in and potentially be their starter for the first month of the season if Breece Hall isn't ready, or be the guy that helps ease Breece Hall in. The thing that I have a hard time believing is that he's going to see more than like 15 snaps a game when Breece Hall is playing like Breece Hall. So if you look at him and say, okay, this is the Jets insurance policy for Breece Hall, I kind of feel like you took him a little too soon. But if you look at him and you say, okay, this is just a talented running back, he'll get a little bit of time, and then if something happens to Breece Hall, look out, because Abanikanda will be like the hottest name in fantasy football. Okay, you got him at the right time. I'm curious. Here's the other thing. What other running back do you take there if you're set on taking a running back?
Kendre Miller.
If it's Roschon Johnson, Jamie, who'd you say?
Kendre Miller.
Kendre Bell? Okay.
Kendre Miller. And I think people will take Tyjae Spears too.
They're all interesting picks, and Spears is interesting just because he might be next in line in Tennessee.
The thing I have, and we'll talk about Spears later, but the thing I have so much trouble with is he's starting behind Derrick Henry. So unless Henry gets hurt this year, he has no value. And the reason he fell in the draft is because they discovered he does not have an ACL. And so they think he's probably a one contract back. So
I wish every team would think they're just a one contract back.
Hines Ward once thought Hines Ward didn't have ACLs either. Is that right? Jamie, do you remember that story?
There's something, yeah, some cartilage situation, isn't he?
I know. Like I said, Odell Beckham said he didn't have one for a while, right? Does he have one now? Did they put one in? Or
I'm not
does
sure.
it just not? Yeah,
But like,
I don't know.
you know,
He might have 4 ACLs at this point.
Yeah, like for me, like I would take Miller over Achane personally.
Right. And I think like he went 2 picks later to Jack, you see here. I think those guys will be in the same range. I just like Miller. I don't know that he can fulfill the pass catching role. And so I think this year he's probably, even if Alvin Kamara is out, and he probably won't be out for more than half the year, he's still going to be in a big time committee with Jamal Williams as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, you're still talking about short term versus long term. You know, and so when we're in the second round, like I can't see if Breece Hall's healthy, is he having a huge role, really ever for the Jets? And you know, it's even going to be, I think, a stretch to see him have the backup role guaranteed to be his. You know, whether they give up on Michael Carter, whether they, you know, continue to use Donovan Knight. You know, I don't know how they'll view those guys. You know, unless Izzy comes in and blows the doors off, which he easily could. I mean, we saw how those two struggled at times last season, but it's such a difficult path for him to be the lead guy there. And then Achane, again, being smaller, you know, if you want to go rookie season versus long term, I could certainly see if he has a productive rookie season and he's behind 2 very injury prone backs, but there's still two injury prone backs who are very familiar with the coach, with the system, and I think are going to have the role ahead of him until that potential injury occurs for one, if not both. So for me, like, Jamal Williams is not a long-term solution in New Orleans. Alvin Kamara is probably done as soon as his, you know, maybe after this year, depending on even what happens with the suspension. So if Miller has a productive rookie season in whatever role he has, you know, he could end up competing for that lead job next year. So that's why, you know, I look at situations a little bit more than maybe necessarily talent.
Right. So let's just, we've already now halfway through the second round in terms of picks. I want to recap the first round and the first pick, six picks of the second round. The first round, we went Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jordan Addison, Anthony Richardson, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and Zach Charbonnet, 6th to Dan Schneier. Then we went Zay Flowers, Bryce Young, Quentin Johnston, C.J. Stroud, Dalton Kincaid, and Devon Achane to Dave with the 12th pick. Now we are rolling in round 2. Jonathan Mingo, who is my 12th player, and Jamie said his 5th wide receiver, went with the first pick of round 2, followed by Josh Downs. I took Izzy, then Marvin Mims, Kendre Miller, and Rashee Rice. We'll stop there. So we kind of had the Abanikanda Miller discussion. What about Josh Downs versus Marvin Mims versus Rashee Rice? I have Downs and Mims right in this range, back to back. Another 2 guys who I'm really struggling with. Surprisingly, as the guy with all the Chiefs paraphernalia behind me, I am not. I'm not a big fan of Rashee Rice. So if either one of you can convince me, he was not in my top 15 wide receivers before the draft. And I didn't bump him up because he went to go to Kansas City, because I'm not sure he's better than Sky Moore or Kadarius Toney. Does anybody disagree with me about him?
No, we had this discussion. It feels like he's a MVS replacement,
which is not good because he's not a burner.
Yeah. So, okay. So basically we're just saying we hate Dan's draft.
What I can tell you is that he has 19 touchdowns in his last 24 games at SMU. I think he's got a shot to be a capable NFL receiver. I'm going to take Josh Downs ahead of him. I think Downs is maybe a little more capable. Definitely could have some huge volume. I think his floor is a slot receiver for the Indianapolis Colts for the next 4 years. Maybe doing the things that Paris Campbell never could do.
Is that a good thing with Anthony Richardson? Jamie, he's a Gator, so I'll ask you, doesn't Richardson profile as better for the downfield guys than the short area targets?
It's kind of why I don't really fear Michael Pittman. I think Pittman's game is going to, be a little bit different this year, in terms of what we saw from him last season, because Matt Ryan couldn't throw the ball down the field and the other guys were just inept. So, but I think, again, you have to sort of project out what these guys can become. And so the hope is that Anthony Richardson becomes a better quarterback as a passer, and helping him doing that is a guy that's going to get open in the short area, part of the field. And so I think Josh Downs is going to win in a lot of those scenarios. And so look, it's not like he's going to become Julian Edelman in his heyday with the Patriots. That's not necessarily what you should be hoping for. But you could be, in a situation where Cole Beasley stats, that type of, player where, not dynamic superstar, but if you're getting that as a low end, as the floor, that's not a bad place to start, and so it's obviously a receiving core that's still in the works. I think Alec Pierce has to take a big step forward. He didn't have the rookie season we hope for him. But there's some nice pieces here. And so I think Josh Downs steps into an opportunity right away where, some of these other guys may have to struggle.
We are finishing up round 2 now. So the 7th pick, Chris Towers took Tyjae Spears. We talked about him behind Derrick Henry. Also has the medical concerns, but some big-time upside if he actually ends up in that Derrick Henry role next year. Jalen Hyatt goes to George Maselli. Roschon Johnson goes to R.J. White. I want to talk more about him because he was somebody I liked more before the draft than I do now. Sam Laporta at pick 10 in the second round. Cedric Tillman goes to Jamie, wide receiver out of Tennessee. Hyatt and Tillman played together, went 1 pick apart in the NFL draft, go 3 picks apart here. And then Dave takes Jaden Reed with the 12th pick. So first, Dave, those 5 guys that went before you, Spears, Hyatt, Johnson, Laporta, and Tillman, how many of those guys would you have taken over Jaden Reed?
Definitely would have taken Tillman. I'm not sure on Laporta. Probably. Maybe not, because I could have taken Meyer. I had a real tough call with my pick in round 2. So I'm going to say no on Laporta. Definitely yes on Roschon Johnson. And probably yes on Jalen Hyatt.
So you're optimistic. You're the Bears fan. So
no, I'm not.
I know.
The Chicago Bears.
I just always say that, and you always argue with me. So Khalil Herbert, Deontay Foreman already there. You think Johnson wins the job?
I think he'll have a chance to have a huge role in that offense for the next couple of years. I think he's better than Deontay Foreman. I'm not sure if he's better than Deontay Foreman in September, but to get a bruising back in Chicago. Those guys have usually been really good for the Bears and really good for fantasy when they've been given an opportunity. I think he's more elusive than David Montgomery, for example, although that's not saying much. I think that he'll have it. I think he'll have a chance to be the 1B back by 2024, and he will provide good running back depth for whoever gets him in Dynasty for the next couple of years.
David Montgomery catching strays for no reason at all. I worry a little bit, Jamie, in this offense that, I don't think Justin Fields is going to throw the ball a ton to his running backs, and Johnson's probably not going to have huge. I mean, he did that a lot in college. I'm not sure he's going to do that a lot in the NFL. But I worry. Dave says the 1B on a team where the quarterback runs the ball 180 times and doesn't throw to his running backs doesn't seem particularly exciting to me.
I'm still trying to figure out who's going to be the 1A, because Dave says in September Foreman might be better. I mean, look, we've kind of negated D'Onta Foreman at the start of every season, understandably so, for the last couple of years. And by the middle of the season, we were talking about him, backing up Christian McCaffrey, backing up I'm not backing McCaffrey, but just what he's done the last couple of years, just in terms of stepping into some roles, Derrick Henry in Tennessee. Henry. Yep. He's a good runner, and you could play the what if game with him if he had never popped his Achilles, maybe what kind of career he would have had. And so is Khalil Herbert the lead guy? Is he more of a specialist? He had some good production last season when David Montgomery was there. So I think you let them all compete and see how it all shakes out. But it's not a bad spot for Roschon Johnson. If you're talking about poor kid, being stuck behind one of the best running backs that we've seen the last 10 years at Texas with Bijan Robinson. He's a backup to Robinson. So I'm excited. I don't mind the pick there.
Yeah, I think into round 2 is where he's going to go. He fell to round 3 for me, but I'm just not. I have a really hard time distinguishing between those 3 backs, and I do think D'Onta Foreman might be the best. We're just gonna have to wait and see how that works in camp.
But it's also another short term versus long term, because Foreman's probably not going to be around very long,
right?
And Herbert's going to run out his rookie deal, and we'll see if they decide to bring him back as well. So Johnson may not have to wait long to be the feature guy, even if he doesn't do anything very much in his rookie season.
We are working our way through round 3. We'll talk about that next. Okay, first 3 picks of round 3. Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame, with the first pick of round 3. I don't think anybody thought before the draft he was going to be available in round 3. We'll see if that continues. Tank Dell goes to Jacob Gibbs with the second pick, and then I took Michael Wilson. I know we kind of glossed over Laporta in round 2. Jamie, I saw in one of the show notes that you have him as your top-ranked rookie tight end in redraft. I do as well. He's also my number 2 in Dynasty. Dave, where are you on these 3 tight ends, both in redraft and in Dynasty?
Well, we know that Kincaid is the number 1. I'm a little worried about a target crunch for Laporta, certainly in his rookie season. So I think I might lean toward Mayer in redraft, because I think there's a chance he could see more targets and score more touchdowns than Laporta. If you told me Laporta is going to be is the guy you prefer long-term over Michael Mayer, I totally get that. I totally understand it. He's a little faster, not nearly as good of a blocker, so he'll be used more in that passing game role rather than asked to block a lot more. But I could see Mayer being a good contributor. I thought about taking him at the last pick in round 2. Opted against it just because and I guess this is where I really come out. I'm not sure, for all the depth that this tight end class has, I don't know if there's 1 or even 2 guys that can be outstanding for fantasy over the long term. I think they can be good, but I don't, as top 5 type guys, I don't know if any of these guys are going to make it there.
I think for Kincaid and Mayer both, maybe not for Laporta, because I do think he could be the best one this year. I just told people, set an alarm on your phone for October of 2024 to make an offer for Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer if you really want them. They will be cheaper then, or at least Kincaid will. I'm not sure Mayer will. It will be cheaper then than he is right now, I think. But I do. It's interesting when thinking that Laporta has more competition for targets, but Michael Mayer has Austin Hooper there. Laporta doesn't have more competition for tight end snaps, certainly. So that will be interesting to see that work out. Jamie, Tank Dell went with the second pick in round 3. He was drafted by the Houston Texans. He was the first wide receiver they took. And then we saw Xavier Hutchinson Hutchinson go there also. They pair up with Nico Collins, Robert Woods. Is there a chance Tank Dell at 5'8", 165 pounds leads the Texans in targets this year?
I mean, there's obviously a chance. Nico Collins struggled to stay healthy last year. We know the situation with John Mechie. Thankfully, he's trending in the right direction. But it's Robert Woods is 31 and clearly was terrible last year. He's only really had success. If you factor in his time with the Rams, his first part of his career was pretty frustrating with Buffalo. So I think there's clearly an opportunity, and anytime you have new quarterback and rookie receiver coming in, that pairing may take off and be the rapport that we love to see. So I'd be surprised. I'm kind of rooting for Nico and Mechie to be the top two guys there, just based on what I like about Nico Collins and the story for Mechie. But it's not a bad dart throw here, round 3. And you can make a case that some of the picks in round 2, if you're just taking position value, wide receivers we know are better in Dynasty than any other spot, to take a chance on a guy that has opportunity to step in and be a playmaker right from day one.
I took a wide receiver right after Tank Dell, Michael Wilson, who will be, as soon as DeAndre Hopkins is traded, whether that's in training camp or the middle of this year, the biggest wide receiver on the Arizona Cardinals, and maybe even the only wide receiver over 6 foot tall on the Arizona Cardinals. I do think Wilson could develop into a good red zone threat there and has the upside to just be the number 1 wide receiver. Will Levis goes to Jack Capitorto with the 5th pick in round 3. I don't really feel real excited about drafting Will Levis in a 1 quarterback league, Dave. But do you still think that he has the upside to justify where we thought he might get drafted?
Yeah, I do, because I think he's got a chance to start for the Titans in 2024. And I tend to believe that the Titans are a smartly coached team. They know what they can do. They play to their strengths. And I think that'll continue even after Derrick Henry leaves the team. And so if they've got Will Levis, I think they'll just play to his strengths. And that might mean continuing to try and running the ball 50% of the time and limiting him as far as passing goes. But, there were things about him, especially in 2021, that I liked. I thought that he mostly did a good job of taking care of the football when a play broke down. There were a couple of bonehead interceptions. The strong arm is evident. You can watch him, the velocity on his throws. Sometimes it's to a fault. But I think he's got some good traits, and I think he can be, if harnessed properly, could be a good quarterback with a chance to have top 12 stats from time to time at quarterback for a 3rd-round pick. I don't think it's that much risk. And there's enough reward. You just have to be patient for it.
We have 2 picks left in round 3, 2 picks left in this draft. You guys need to make those picks. I am going to read through the 10 players we've had selected so far in round 3. You not only have to think about who you're going to take with these picks, but then think about who is the best player in your mind who didn't get drafted. Like leagues that go deeper than this, who should people be looking for that didn't get drafted? So we had Michael Mayer go first, Tank Dell second in round 3. Michael Wilson, wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, goes 3rd to me. Chase Brown, running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, possible Joe Mixon replacement. I think more likely Samaje Perine from last year replacement, goes to Zach Brook. Will Levis goes 5th to Jack. Luke Musgrave. Dan takes the tight end 6th. 7th is Zach Evans, one of my biggest fallers, and I do still think there's upside there. I like him in round 3. Tank Bigsby goes 8th. Hendon Hooker goes 9th to RJ White. Dwayne McBride. Thomas Schaefer. That's no surprise. Dwayne McBride is a Minnesota Viking. And we're still waiting on the last 2 picks. There's Luke Schoonmaker, Jamie. He actually is my favorite tight end named Luke in this class.
Yeah, no, I like him better than Musgrave also. Obviously not ideal to take 2 tight ends, but you know what? You put something in my head that probably stuck with me is you said that last year when we did this rookie draft, I did it based on our league, the order. And right now, my roster in that league is Darren Waller and no other tight ends. And so I guess I had that in my head that I needed to add some tight ends. So taking Kincaid and Schoonmaker. But again, never a bad situation if you like your team. And think about it. If you're picking at the end of a rookie draft, right, your team is probably coming off a championship, a playoff run, deep playoff run, if you typically go that route, barring in trades. And so I think you're adding trying to get, something to a very set roster. And so never a bad idea to try and take best player available. And for me, that was Schoonmaker at this point.
Okay, so Dave finishes off the draft with Evan Hull, Jonathan Taylor's new, hopefully, backup in Indianapolis. And so now we've got 36 players off the board. Now, our rookie draft goes 6 rounds. We were talking about that. It has IDP players and it has free agents. But a lot of rookie drafts go more than 3 rounds. There are players in my top 40 who weren't drafted. I'll give my favorite player after you guys. Jamie, who's the best player who didn't get drafted in this draft?
Oh, gosh.
Dave, do you have one ready?
I've got 2.
Well,
and maybe
give
even
one because
3.
you're going to cheat. You can text one to Jamie.
I am hoping that what do we call it? The New England Patriots car wash takes care of Kayshon Boutte.
Okay, you know how in car washes they have those signs that say that the vehicles can't be outside of these parameters. It can't be over 10 foot tall or it can't be super wide.
Right.
The Patriots car wash does not work for wide receivers. No wide receivers accepted.
Okay.
But okay, so Kayshon, that
So
makes
you're
sense.
rejecting. So you are
No,
rejecting.
I'm
my
not rejecting. I
answer.
think he's a good pick and a guy who, I mean, a year ago, if we'd have done a just pretend mock draft, he'd have probably been a 1st round pick. And before the draft, he might have been a 2nd round pick. And so the fact that he's not getting picked until round 4 now, I think that's a good one. Jamie, do you have another one besides Kayshon?
I was going to go Deuce Vaughn, just with
Yep.
situation, knowing the Cowboys have an opening at running back behind Tony Pollard, again, barring, as we talked about yesterday, barring the potential of Ezekiel Elliott coming back. But, Pollard's on a 1-year deal right now with the franchise tag. They don't really have a backup of significant value. Ronald Jones, Malik Davis, those type of guys. If Deuce Vaughn does anything, he may not ever be the featured guy, but he could work his way into, a shared role. And we saw last year, the 2 running backs in Dallas, whatever you think of Ezekiel Elliott, he scored 12 touchdowns. And Pollard was a pretty special talent. So, there is room for 2 guys to be productive for fantasy. So that was another player that I was considering when I took, Schoonmaker.
You definitely chose my favorite player who didn't get drafted. Absolutely love Deuce Vaughn. Really hopeful that he can have a role in Dallas and make a fantasy impact. He's fantastic. I will go with Eric Gray. Hopefully the backup to Saquon Barkley, who may not be there for another year. Who knows? Maybe Saquon won't even show up for week 1. He says he's not signing the franchise tag. That's going to do it for our 3-round rookie-only mock draft, the first one we've done since the draft. Jamie's going to write this up. It will be on the site. Be looking for that. We're also going to do a full redraft mock with the rookies today, and that will be up this week as well, right, Jamie?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've got multiple mock drafts coming your way. We've got Dynasty Download just published today. Go subscribe to that. We've got more mock drafts coming next week. And, of course, we'll have more Fantasy Football Today Dynasty next Tuesday for you. We'll talk to you next Tuesday.